Hey everyone, and welcome to Cosplay Sewing School. Today we are going to be making some cool foam flowers, so stay tuned. First thing we are going to need is some EVA foam. I like to get my foam from SKS Props, a pair of scissors, a hobby knife, a Sharpie, and a quilting pin. Next, we'll need a heat gun and a respirator, safety first. We're also going to be using the Sizzix Big Shot die cutter. You can use any die cutter that you have or even a template. And you'll also need the appropriate tools to go with it and your die. You will also need something to protect your surface and a paintbrush, as well as some acrylic paint, a fabric ruler, or a metal ruler, or a ruler of your choice. Go ahead and lay down your die cutter and measure the length and the width. Mark out a rectangle that is the same length and width as your die, and go ahead and cut that out. Check and make sure that it properly fits your die. Let's get out our Sizzix Big Shot, as well as the tools that go with it, and make our plexiglass sandwich. So we're going to use our plexiglass here and put our die down, then the EVA foam, and put that last piece on top and run it through the die cutter. Check out the details of this video to get some templates if you don't have a die cutter. So you can see it cut it out really nicely. Let's go ahead and put that away. And let's pull out our shapes. So the next thing we're going to do is score the foam. To do this, we're going to cut partially through the foam, not to the back. And we're just going to put lines in this a way that looks pretty. So if you look here, you can see I did not cut all the way through on the front and the back. Now we're going to repeat that for all 3 layers of this flower. This flower is a multi-layered flower. If you only had one flower or you just want to do one size, you can do that too. So I'm going to go ahead and protect my cutting board with an old tray. And then what I'm going to do is put that pin through that flower and put it down onto the tray. This is so when I use the heat gun, it does not blow away. So let's go ahead and put that heat gun on a medium setting and on low blower if your heat gun has that. In order to heat these, what you're going to do is just keep that heat moving around. We don't want to get the heat in one spot too much because it is going to melt the foam. So you'll see those scoring lines start to open up, and pretty soon that flower will just start to curl up. Now, as soon as it starts to curl up, remove the heat gun, and now you have the chance to mold it while it is cooling. It cools really fast here, so you want to work quickly. Now I'm keeping this flower a little flat because it is a multi-layered flower. You could put this over something round like a ball or the bottom of a bowl and give it a little bit more shape to it. But in this case, I want to keep it kind of flattish, so I'm just making the ends of those petals go up. And you can see as I go through the different layers, it'll look a little different. And I like the variation. Flowers are not always exactly the same. So here we're doing the very last flower, which this one is very tiny and is kind of easy to burn. I actually burned a few before I got this one right. Let's go ahead and shape it. There we go. Now we have the 3 layers, and we're going to go ahead and just check them, make sure they look pretty. And they do. So the next thing we're going to do is paint. So I am not sealing this before I start painting just because I kind of like the look of it. I think it gives it kind of a leather floral look, but you could seal it the way you do any other EVA foam prop. Using your brush and applying very thin layers, go ahead and make sure that that first layer is covered nice and good. You're going to see through it a little bit, and that's okay. So we're going to go ahead and do the tops of all 3 layers here. Now make sure that you don't have any excess paint kind of hanging off the edge. I'm also using a medium body, and you could even use a soft body acrylic paint here. So now that it's dry, we're going to go ahead and paint the back sides. And repeat this step for all 3 layers. Let those layers dry. Now we have our first coat. And the next thing to do is the edges. The edges are really kind of finicky. So what I do is I load up my brush with a reasonable amount of paint and then just kind of deposit the paint on the edges using the side of my brush. And then after I do that, I'm going to go ahead and brush over the very inside layer there. That way I can get the excess that ended up on the edges. Just make sure that you have a nice, even, thin coat. And I don't worry too much about the center on the bottoms of those because I am going to be gluing that down to another surface. If you were, then you would want to paint that in separate pieces. So I'm going to repeat this for all 3 layers. Finally, once those 3 layers are dry and we've put 2 coats of paint onto everything, I am going to make this look very shiny. I'm going to use some Liquitex Basics acrylic gloss varnish and paint a thin layer on top of these flowers. Make sure that you don't have any bubbles or any pooling in this step. You want just a very thin layer. If it didn't catch all in the first step, you can actually put a second coat. And I'm going to repeat this step on the fronts and backs for all 3 layers. Finally, because this is a 3-layered flower, we are going to glue those layers together. I am using some Gorilla Super Glue. And I'm just going to put a few little beads of glue, not too much, I don't want it to spill out, and arrange those holes in the center and just push down firmly, trying not to glue my fingers together. And I'm going to do the same thing for the last layer. If you're doing a single layer flower, you wouldn't need this. At this point, you could go ahead and add something pretty into the center, like a button or a rhinestone or a small pearl. You could even use some foam clay to make it look like a more realistic flower. Now, to show you a little variation on how these flowers look when they are done, I used a red undertone and added a half pearl to the center of that flower. This one is just the straight gold paint, and this one is a different shape. I went ahead and antiqued this leaf using black acrylic paint and a dry brush, and then covered it with gloss varnish. If you liked what you saw here today, please be sure to click that like and subscribe button or check me out at cosplaysewing school.com. Thank you so much and happy cosplay!